bruh. Europeans dude, they're doing the Ottomans so dirty.
The Ottoman Empire into catastrophe within just a few weeks.
Damn, bruh. This is kind of sad. This is really sad, bruh. I can't even lie. This is really sad.
Monarchy was surrendered.
Okay, so this is still a part of Members Week, and I was looking to see if anyone else had a freaking suggestion that I haven't done before I restart, go back from top to bottom, and apparently not. So
sparked immense joy across the country. The people had grown weary of Abdul Hamid II's 33-year reign of autocracy. Now, freedom was returning to the land. The joy was so overwhelming that on July 24th, unaware of what the future would bring, the subjects of the Ottoman Empire, but far darker days loomed on the horizon. COP, not wanting to appear as if it had staged a coup to seize power, refrained from taking over the post of Grand Vizier, but it also limited its involvement in the cabinet to only a few members. It sought to control and command governments from the outside, maintaining influence without appearing to rule directly. This approach would do little more than plunge the newborn regime into deeper chaos. Major crises were also beginning to emerge on the international stage. Amid the instability gripping the Ottoman Empire, the foreign ministries of Austria, Hungary, and Russia began to act. 5 months before the declaration of the Second Constitutional Era, Austria secured Ottoman approval for a railway project linking Sarajevo, Novi Pazar, Skopje, Salonika. In return, the Russians received assurances that Austria-Hungary would respect their interests in the Straits. While negotiations were still ongoing, Austria suddenly announced its annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, a territory it had been administering on a temporary basis under the Treaty of Berlin. The annexation drew widespread condemnation from all major powers, and Europe began to sense the looming shadow of war. Outside the great powers, the harshest...
What was the big deal between Bosnia and Herzegovina being annexed by Austria? Because, I always heard, oh yeah, that was such a big deal, but I actually never heard, nor really ever got an explanation of why. I always keep on hearing, oh, this is such a big deal. I never know why
Serbia,
or knew.
Long eyed the provinces of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Serbian newspapers that day called for a fight to the death against Austria. Serbian ministers publicly declared that war was now inevitable and urged the Serbian parliament to convene immediately, approve military spending, and begin mobilization preparations. Serbia's response created such a tense atmosphere across the continent that German Chancellor Bülow would later remark, "Europe has not been in such a state of excitement for years." Amid these rising tensions, even the Ottoman Empire's protest against the annexation faded from European attention. By December 1908, Austria had begun massing troops along the Serbian border. Europe was on the brink of a major war, but the anticipated explosion did not come. Serbia failed to secure the support it sought, either from Europe or from its powerful patron, Russia. While this crisis brought Europe to the brink of war, for the Ottoman Empire it was merely the beginning of the end. Prince Ferdinand of Bulgaria traveled to Budapest, where he was received by the Austrians as if he were a king. Austria, seeking to divert attention from its annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, encouraged the Bulgarians to declare independence. At a time when the Ottoman Empire was engulfed in constitutional chaos and preoccupied with the Bosnia issue, Ferdinand declared the establishment of an independent Kingdom of Bulgaria. Though the declaration of independence was not recognized by the Ottoman Empire, with Russian mediation, a settlement was reached whereby the Ottoman Empire would officially recognize the Kingdom of Bulgaria in exchange for financial compensation. The final blow of the 1908 crisis came from...
Did they even get the financial compensation though? Did they?
Crete. After the Greco-Ottoman War of 1897, the heir to the Greek throne had been appointed governor of Crete. The island had de facto fallen under Greek control, and its ties with the Ottoman Empire had become virtually non-existent. On the same day Austria annexed Bosnia and
bruh.
Herzegovina and Bulgaria declared independence, Crete also proclaimed its unification with the Kingdom of Greece. The blame for the territorial losses and growing political instability was placed squarely on the Committee of Union and Progress, which was seen as the driving force behind the constitutional regime. The reserve battalions stationed in the capital rose up in rebellion against the constitutional order and the Unionists. This reactionary uprising in Istanbul created the impression, particularly among COP branches and military units in Rumelia, that the constitution was in grave danger, and that efforts were underway to abolish it entirely. The commander of the Third Army in Salonika, Mahmud Şevket Pasha, acted swiftly and dispatched a division-sized force to Istanbul under the command of Hüseyin Hüsnü Pasha. After the Army of Action suppressed the rebellion, Sultan Abdülhamid II was deposed, accused of having ties to the uprising. For the Ottoman Empire, this moment marked another major turning point. With the enthronement of Sultan Mehmed Reshad, the era of powerful sultans came to an end.
Is that how he looked? Oh my gosh, look at his eyes. So many people with freaking cock eyes.
Would lie with the parliament.
Ay.
With the Committee of Union and Progress. As crises erupted across Ottoman territories and global tensions escalated, the worst days had yet to come for the Ottoman Empire.
You saw that shit? Yo, you saw that shit, bro? The guy bumped into... Look at that.
As crises erupted across Ottoman territories and global tensions escalated,
this nigga.
The worst days had yet to come for the Ottoman Empire.
Oh.
In North Africa, which had become a battleground for colonial powers, the empire held on to only a single remaining territory, Tripolitania. Lacking any land connection to the rest of the empire, was essentially Ottoman only on paper. And now it had become the target of a country that had entered the imperial race far too late. Italy, much like Germany, had completed its national unification only recently. Yet this young and ambitious state had no intention of abandoning its expansionist aspirations. It had already tested its colonial ambitions in Abyssinia,
they lost.
to suffer a major defeat. In the years that followed, Italy shifted its focus to the Mediterranean, a more familiar and geographically closer region. For the Italians, the Ottoman Empire's last possession in the region, a perfect target. Exploiting the shifting balance of power in Europe, triggered by the Balkan crisis, Italy launched an invasion of Tripolitania in October 1911. The Ottoman Empire, which lacked a fully equipped army in the region, was caught off guard and found itself in a difficult position. A local resistance, organized with the help of volunteer Ottoman officers. In the summer of 1912, the Italians intensified their campaign, launching expeditions against the Dodecanese Islands in an effort to force the Ottomans out of the war. The empire, making one last desperate push to repel the Italians, remained unaware of the far greater catastrophe that loomed on the horizon. With the outbreak of the Italo-Turkish War, the geopolitical landscape began to shift once again. For the Balkan states,
oh my gosh, you know, I can't help but just feel bad for the Ottoman Empire, bro. Oh my gosh, bro.
which harbored ambitions in Macedonia, the conflict in Tripolitania presented a critical opportunity. As the war began, the Ottoman Empire, fearing a possible Balkan uprising, had dispatched troops to Macedonia as a precaution. This move would push the Balkan powers to act sooner rather than later. At the time of the war's outbreak, Bulgarian Prime Minister Ivan Geshov was returning from a tour of Europe. He met with Serbian Prime Minister Milivoj Milovanovic in Belgrade. During this meeting, the two leaders agreed on the foundations of a Serbo-Bulgarian alliance. A treaty of alliance was signed on March 13, 1912. Meanwhile, as Serbia and Bulgaria finalized their pact, talks also began between Greece and Bulgaria. Although these negotiations had initially stalled due to disagreements over Crete and Macedonia, they resumed after the Serbo-Bulgarian treaty was concluded. a Greek-Bulgarian alliance was also signed. With Serbia's support, Montenegro would soon join this alignment. The alliance, which would go down in history as the Balkan League, was built on shaky foundations. The treaties said almost nothing about how conquered Ottoman territories, especially Macedonia, would be divided in the event of victory. The agreements were vague and superficial, setting the stage for intense rivalry during the war itself. After the Balkan League was formed, the member states began looking for pretexts to declare war on the Ottoman Empire. Suddenly, Bulgarian guerrilla activity surged. Bombs began exploding in Macedonia. Their true objective was to launch war before the conflict with Italy ended, thereby catching the Ottomans off balance. Demonstrations erupted in Sofia, with protesters calling for war against the Ottoman Empire. The European powers, meanwhile, were closely monitoring developments in real time. The Russians hoped that the Balkan Alliance had been formed with the aim of preserving the regional status quo. They reached out to their French allies to determine France's stance in the event of war. During these talks, French Prime Minister Raymond Poincaré reportedly stated, "Unless Germany initiates an attack, French public opinion will not support entering a war solely over Balkan issues. Do not count on France militarily in the Balkans." The British, taking a similar position, stated, "If Germany does not get involved, neither can we." Britain's primary concern was its colonial interests. The Italo-Turkish War, which involved an attack on Muslim territory, had already triggered a backlash among Muslim populations in British colonies, and openly supporting the Balkan states against the Ottoman Empire would only exacerbate these tensions. Moreover, Britain was wary of alienating the Ottomans and pushing them into Germany's orbit by taking an openly hostile stance. None of the European great powers truly wanted a war. However, in this tense atmosphere, none of them were willing to intervene directly, fearing they might unsettle the balance and provoke one another. This ambivalence and inaction would ultimately lead to disaster for the Ottoman Empire in the Balkans. As relations with the Balkan states began to deteriorate in September, the Sublime Porte sought to delay the outbreak of war. The military situation was unfavorable. After the proclamation of the constitutional monarchy, a series of reforms and innovations had been initiated within the army. A systematic and large-scale purge was launched within the officer corps. Officers and pashas deemed politically problematic by the Unionists, especially those without formal military academy training, were removed. But due to Sultan Abdulhamid and the old guard of pashas, this purge had not been implemented. Now, at last, it was underway. Courses that had been banned during Abdulhamid's reign, such as Ottoman military history, irregular warfare, and political history, were reintroduced into the curriculum. Military students began receiving much more practical training. Large-scale maneuvers and live-fire exercises were organized, and new tactics and techniques were applied by the troops within realistic training scenarios. The modern weapons and equipment that had long been locked away in warehouses due to Abdulhamid's paranoia were now distributed to army units. Soldiers were able to develop their marksmanship skills on firing ranges. However, external events would prevent these structural reforms from being implemented in a healthy and comprehensive way. The reforms were well conceived, but poorly timed. Before the second year of reforms could be completed, Italy had invaded Tripolitania. And now, on the horizon, loomed the Balkan catastrophe. The state
That's what I'm looking at right now. I want to see how the Balkan, yeah, like how that whole Balkan, because I know about the Balkan Wars, I know about that, but to see it from the Ottoman perspective, that's
prepared for such a war. 70,000 experienced soldiers had just been discharged from the army. Many capable officers were either fighting in Tripolitania or on their way to join the war effort. Additionally, 29 battalions from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd armies had been dispatched to suppress a rebellion in Yemen. The Ottoman General Staff had been formulating its plans regarding the Balkan borders, which had been drawn by the Treaty of Berlin. For these territories, militarily indefensible against multiple enemy states, the war planning was built on the flawed assumption of a single-front war. The possibility of a Balkan alliance was a scenario the Ottomans did not even wish to imagine.
Bro. Yeah, and that's something that I've noticed too myself about the late Ottoman Empire. Its Balkan borders were horrendous. It just was so indefensible. It's just like, how do you even defend that, bro? Like, it's insane to me how Bulgaria and the Ottomans will be freaking allies literally like a couple of years from this in World War I.
To imagine. As the war approached, the state's mobilization plans envisioned a 30-day process. But the Balkan states, having already completed their own mobilization and preparations, had no intention of allowing the Ottoman army time to prepare. The reinforcements from Anatolia had not even reached 50% of the projected numbers. The Greek navy had completely blocked sea transportation, and the single-track railway line could not handle the traffic. Despite these threats, Ottoman public opinion and army personnel wholeheartedly supported the war and the mobilization decision. Morale was high, and instead of focusing on defending the remaining provinces, many believed they would reclaim the territories previously lost. In this atmosphere of uncertainty and lofty expectations, the Ottoman Empire was dragged into a war for which it was utterly unprepared. The war began on October 8th, with an attack by Montenegro, and turned into a full Balkan War when the other allies issued a joint note on October 13th, demanding that Rumelia be divided into autonomous administrations based on ethnic principles. The war, which would last only a short time, unfolded as a series of disasters. Unaware of the secret military and political agreements between Bulgaria and Serbia concerning the future of Macedonia, the Ottoman General Staff had deployed most of its forces not in Thrace, which would prove to be the primary front. The battle plans, flawed from start to finish in both design and execution, revealed their consequences in the very first days.
Damn.
Before the Eastern Army was even prepared, Minister of War Nazım Pasha ordered an attack. On October 27, 1912, the offensive began.
Look, you're...
But the troops were routed and forced to retreat to the Visburgas line. After regrouping to some extent, the army once again faced the Bulgarians in Luleburgaz on October 29th and suffered another defeat. The Western Army, meanwhile, was defeated by the Serbs at Kumanovo on October 23rd, retreating to Monastir. Political factions within the army, along with a lack of coordination and logistical support, pushed the Ottoman Empire into catastrophe within just a few weeks.
Damn, bruh. This is kind of sad. This is really sad, bruh. I can't even lie. This is really sad.
The monarchy was surrendered to the Greeks on November 8th. Just 1 month after the declaration of war on October 8th, without a single shot being fired by Hasan Tahsin Pasha. Despite having over 20,000 soldiers stationed in the city, Tahsin Pasha surrendered it and would later be tried in absentia by a military tribunal for treason against the state.
What in the world?
The Ottoman Empire was losing a city with each passing day.
Didn't even... I'm speechless.
The Ottoman armies had suffered devastating defeats in Macedonia at the hands of the Balkan states. Only Edirne, Yarnia, and Shkodra remained under siege but still held out. The Bulgarian armies, having swiftly defeated the Ottoman forces in Thrace, pursued them as far as Çatalca, the final defensive line before Istanbul. On November 6, 1912, the Bulgarians resumed their advance, covering 15 kilometers per day for 6 days. Shorlu fell on November 7th, followed by Cherkasy on the 8th, Malkara on the 9th. Rejecting the Ottoman Empire's proposal for an armistice, The Bulgarians launched an offensive at Çatalca, aiming to capture Istanbul itself. In response, the Ottomans established their final line of defense at Çatalca to protect their capital. Only at this point was the mobilization process completed and the army reached the strength it had initially aimed for. The Battle of Çatalca was a fight for survival. If this line were breached, Istanbul would fall.
And holy shit, bro. And the European powers aren't doing it, bruh. Bro, the Europeans, bruh. The Europeans dude, they're doing the Ottomans so dirty. It's like, it's just like, wow. It's just so, so wow. Honestly, I mean, that's a game of geopolitics, but man, oh man. That's honestly puts a bad taste in my mouth. I cannot lie.
The Bulgarian assault, which began on November 17th, resulted in intense combat. With more than 10,000 casualties, the Bulgarians were repelled, and the Ottoman forces secured a vital defensive victory, halting the enemy at the gates of the capital. Following this battle, the renewed armistice proposal was accepted by both sides, and in December 1912, negotiations began in London. The political climate within the Ottoman Empire was no less chaotic than the war itself. Even before the threat of war emerged, in July 1912, the CUCAP had been forced out of power due to the failures in the Tripolitanian War, and a new cabinet, led by Gazi Ahmet Muhtar Pasha, referred to as the Great Cabinet, was formed. But after a string of disasters in the first weeks of the Balkan War, this cabinet was also forced to resign. A new government was formed by Kemal Pasha, who assumed responsibility for managing the war effort. Yet, as defeats continued through November, the government was compelled to seek an armistice. One of the primary causes of the military failures was this political instability. Both the Great Cabinet and the Kemal Pasha government were built on public discontent toward the CUP. But with the outbreak of the Balkan War and the successive military disasters, public dissatisfaction began to shift in a very different direction. At this point, the Unionists once again intervened. After the armistice was signed, while peace terms were being discussed, the European powers began to pressure Istanbul to cede Edirne to Bulgaria. For the Ottoman Empire, Edirne held a uniquely important position, far beyond that of many other cities, known as the City of the Sultans. The idea of surrendering Edirne to the Bulgarians was a horrifying prospect for the Unionists.
Damn, yeah, bro.
Amid this tense atmosphere, the Unionists decided to act. On January 23rd, while the Ottoman cabinet was convening in the Sublime Porte to discuss the official response regarding Edirne, rumors were swirling that the city would be handed over to the Bulgarians. Taking advantage of the moment, leading figures of the Committee of Union and Progress, Enver Bey, Yakup Shamil, Mustafa Necip, and Ermeneci marched toward the government building. When Enver Bey and his group reached the outer hall, the chief aide to the Grand Vizier, Nafiz Bey, rushed out of his room, only to be shot and killed by the raiders. Shortly afterward, Kıbrıslazade Tevfik Bey, aide to the Minister of War, was also shot. To instill fear, they fired into the large windows of the hall, sending shattered glass crashing loudly to the ground. Minister of War Nazım Pasha, unaware of what was happening, ran outside to investigate. Meanwhile, the raiders killed Police Commissioner Celal Bey, who was guarding the entrance, and stormed into the inner hall. As Nazım Pasha approached the Unionists and raised his voice in protest, he was shot in the temple and killed by Yakup Bey.
Bro, so much is happening. God damn, bro. So much is happening. I'm just like, what the hell?
Enver and Talat Beys then burst into the Grand Vizier's office. Enver Bey, with a stern tone, informed the Grand Vizier that the people no longer wanted him in office and demanded his resignation. Kemal Pasha, without saying a word, picked up a piece of paper and wrote his resignation to the Sultan, stating that he was compelled to resign at the request of the military. Enver and Talat Beys then insisted that he add the word people, revising the note to state that he was resigning at the request of the people and the army. A new government was formed under Mahmud Şevket Pasha, which responded to the Balkan League's memorandum. On January 30th, 1913, the government declared that Adrianople was inextricably linked to the Ottoman Empire and could not be ceded to anyone. Following the rejection
I'm on their side. I cannot lie. I'm on their
of the
side.
Balkan states' demands, the armistice was annulled. While fighting continued at Çatalca, the Ottomans also landed troops at Şarkı, hoping to flank the Bulgarians and liberate Adrianople, but this operation also ended in failure. As the
Damn.
war turned increasingly disastrous for the Ottoman Empire, capital itself was once again under threat. In what would be known as the Second Battle of Çatalca, lasting from February to May 1913, the Ottoman army found itself with no remaining hope. One by one, the besieged cities fell. Yanya surrendered to the Greeks on March 6th, Adrianople fell to the Bulgarians on March 26th, and Ishkodra was taken by the Montenegrins on April 23rd. As peace talks resumed in London, the resulting Treaty of London was signed on May 30th, 1913. This agreement marked the end of centuries-long Ottoman presence in Rumelia. All Ottoman territories in the Balkans were ceded to the Balkan League states, and Albanian independence was officially recognized.
Literally, gang, bro. Honestly, I'm just, I don't even know, man. That's just unfair. I mean, I know that's just how it is. That's just how geopolitics is. But I don't know, man. That's one of the most unfair things that I have watched in a long time. That just put a really, that put a very bitter taste in my mouth. I just really could not believe, and so much shit was going on. It's like the reforms, man. The reforms came too damn late. Like I said in my previous video, this does answer a lot of questions that I always had about the late Ottoman Empire. Like, why did such a large empire like the Ottoman Empire just break apart the way that it did, right? Because I always used to think, like, yo, the Ottoman Empire was huge. Like, for a big country that just fall apart just like that, like, why, right? And that makes a lot of sense now, honestly.
However, from the very first days of the war, competition over Macedonia had already begun among the member states of what was called the Balkan League. The moment of distribution, left vague in pre-war alliances, had now arrived. Except for Montenegro, the remaining members of the League sought to fill the vast vacuum left behind by the Ottoman Empire's withdrawal from the Balkans and to claim the largest share of the spoils. What would go down in history as the Second Balkan War began barely a month after the ink had dried on the Treaty of London, which had ended the First War.
Wow.
A new coalition was quickly formed against Bulgaria, and Romania also joined in. Amidst all these developments, the Ottoman Empire did not hesitate to take advantage of Bulgaria's weakened position. On July 21st, Ottoman troops began marching toward Adrianople. They recaptured Lüleburgaz and Visa. Ottoman forces under the command of Enver Pasha entered Adrianople, bringing a sliver of solace after the catastrophe. The city of the Sultans had been reclaimed.
What would you say to
Balkan Wars, especially the rapid string of defeats in the First Balkan War, would cast a long shadow over the Ottoman Empire's future.
And isn't World War I considered the Third Balkan War as well? So we had three
The perception that
Balkan
the
wars
empire
in
was collapsing
less
became
than
widespread across Europe.
3 years.
This perception whetted the appetites of foreign powers with ambitions on Ottoman lands. Among the Entente powers, discussions of dividing Ottoman territory had already begun. This was the general state of the Ottoman Empire. The Committee of Union and Progress had taken control of the state and would rule until the end of the World War. The mass atrocities committed by Balkan armies, resulting in the massacre of hundreds of thousands of people and the forced exile of survivors,
Surprised you didn't talk
barefoot
about
and
that.
destitute, into Anatolia, left lasting trauma. And for the Turkish people, who longed for peace after a string of disasters, the only thing awaiting them was more war. The Great War was now at the doorstep.
Bruh, what an excellent, oh my gosh, dude, what an excellent documentary. Honestly, what an excellent documentary, bro. Gives me so much more insight to the late Ottoman Empire. Oh my gosh, I love it. This was a part of Members Week. Look, man, if you have any suggestions like this that you know I'd love to react to, comment in the comments below. If you're new to my channel, you let my reactions, man, subscribe for more like this. Bro, this was just seeing the way how the Ottoman Empire is just slowly just ripping apart. It's just, I don't even know, man. It just made me feel a type of way. I can't even describe it. I just can't describe the way how I feel. It was just like, wow, that's just so, it's like watching a shark, when you catch a shark and you take the fucking fins off for shark fin soup, and you just throw the rest of the shark in the ocean, and the shark is left helpless to die because sharks need its fins to swim. So it's literally like that's literally how I felt seeing this shit. It's literally the same feeling like how I saw those sharks being caught and their fins being cut off bit by bit, just like how the Ottomans were losing each region bit by bit, and it's just left fucking helpless, man. I don't know, man. That's just ugh. But anyways, man, I made a membership, 99 cents a month. I purposely made it cheap for my dedicated viewers to keep in contact with me. Like I said, guys, I'm gonna be starting college. I have a job. I have other stuff outside of my YouTube channel, and as I get more people on my channel, more subscribers, it's gonna be harder for me to respond to more comments. Okay, so that's why I put the membership there. Okay, the membership is there so that we have a direct link. Okay, with each other. Okay. It's definitely worth it. None of my members are disappointed. Right now we have 7 members. As I get more members, I'm gonna improve more perks. But the main perks are, quicker suggestion in the comments, man. Your suggestions are done much more quicker. Your comments are replied to much more faster. Early access to uploads. I'm talking like really early access to like future uploads, and preludes to different types of content that I will be doing in the future, man. Anyways, man, yeah, thank you for watching and goodbye.